Hello, and welcome to my Week 5 course project presentation on antibiotics in the swine industry. The food production industry has been booming since the early 1900s, and even more now to meet demand. With that comes many concerns as we produce so much food in such a short amount of time. The necessity of antibiotics has been a rising concern due to their side effects and dangers to humans and the animals that they are used on. Mostly, antibiotics are used in a way to prevent the spread of disease. However, there are associated risks that we will discover in today's presentation that may change the way that the food industry looks at their use. Specifically, in the production of swine for food, we will dive deeper into a drug, its dark side, and how preventative measures and best practices may save us in the future. Let's start with the basics, so we have a good, well-rounded idea of microbiology in terms of microorganisms and hosts. According to Oregon State University, cellular organisms have been divided into two broad categories based on their cell type. They are either prokaryotic or eukaryotic. In general terms, prokaryotes are smaller, simpler, and with a lot less stuff, which would make eukaryotes larger, more complex, and more cluttered. When considering their functions, a single microbial cell, generally, is able to carry out its life processes of growth, respiration, and reproduction independently of other cells, whether of the same kind or of different kinds. When discussing the basics of microbial genetics and adaptation, we consider the following: basic scientific research on microorganisms, as they offer several features that facilitate the study of evolutionary processes and adaptation, which is an important strategy for enhancing stress tolerance in microbial cell factories. After discussing the basics of microbiology, we can now dive into microbial pathogenesis and infectious diseases within animal hosts. Microbial pathogenesis is the ability of microbes or their components to cause infection in hosts after developing a complex mode of interactions from both hosts and pathogens. Infectious diseases in animal hosts is when animals contract an illness and then spread that illness. The dangers include animals affected by several infectious diseases that shed viruses and bacteria through bodily secretions, contaminating environmental surfaces and farm equipment. These dangers spread across both human and animal hosts. The target food supply industry we are discussing today is the swine farming industry. This industry includes swine production for the use of food, products, and other inquiries. Swine production involves breeding and gestation, farrowing, meaning from birth to weaning, nursery, and feeding and finishing. Antibiotics are used in this industry for several reasons, including treating major swine gastrointestinal and respiratory infections, and of bovine respiratory disease. One of the many antibiotics used in pig farming industries are lincosamides. Lincosamides work by stopping bacteria from making proteins or going through protein synthesis. Protein synthesis is needed for bacteria to grow. In the next slide, we will discuss lincosamides and their overall use in detail. We touched briefly on the drug called lincosamides, which we know stop protein synthesis, but what exactly do they do and how? Protein synthesis is essential for bacterial growth, and when a pig becomes ill from a bacterial infection, lincosamides work by binding with the 50S ribosomal subunit of bacteria and inhibit that protein synthesis. They also inhibit peptidyltransferase action. Lincosamides are bacteriostatic antibiotics. However, when they reach a certain level in the plasma, they also exhibit bactericidal action against some other bacteria. Even though this antibiotic is necessary, we do know that overuse can be a problem as well, and we will go over that further in detail in the next slide. We know that with the use of antibiotics, we can potentially prevent the spread of infectious disease, but what about their associated risks? For many reasons, overuse of antibiotics, such as growth and production, can lead to dangerous effects on both humans and animals. The overuse of antibiotics presents many health effects in animals used in the industry, including higher rates of illness in young pigs and lower growth efficiencies. Other associated risks with the overuse include antibiotic resistance and contamination of food, soil, and nearby water sources from animal waste. The most concerning of these threats to human health lies with the creation of antibiotic-resistant illnesses that can transfer to humans and be extremely hard to treat. So what can we do? With the rise of these associated risks, we must do what we can to prevent the overuse of antibiotics for production and growth in order to ensure public and animal safety. Important regulations have been put in place by the FDA, and hygienic practices for staff, animals, and equipment have been implemented by farmers in the industry to aid in the protection. The FDA now requires farmers to acquire prescriptions for antibiotics and their appropriate use to aid in the prevention of antimicrobial resistant illnesses. This rule is groundbreaking for public and animal health and aims to prevent antibiotic resistance from wreaking havoc. With easy access to these growth-promoting drugs, the FDA took measures to ensure that veterinarians were not pressured to give antibiotics indiscriminately. Short-term consequences of not adhering to these best practices and regulations are not comparable to the imminent threat of antibiotic resistance and its public and animal health dangers. Lastly, we have a reference page. Thank you for coming to my Week 5 course project presentation, and I hope you learned more about antibiotics, the swine industry, and some basic microbiology.